Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for mixing heavy, distorted guitars. We're going to be looking at distorted guitars today, but before we jump in, if you're ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process as a whole and really start to hone your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist. It's a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process, step by step, to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without the hassle and without the guesswork. It is completely free, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at these distorted guitars. We're kind of going to walk through these guitars piece by piece here. So I'll play you the finished sound that we have for these distorted guitars. It's a pair of guitars, one pan hard left, one pan hard right. Stereo signal here, and then they're sending into my electric guitar bus here. I'll play you the finished sound, then I'll play you the raw sound, and we'll kind of build it out piece by piece here and discuss what we're doing with each of these plugins, and you'll hear how it's contributing to our final product or our finished guitar sound here. Here's the finished sound, and then I'll take off all the plugins. You can hear the sound we started with here. So doing quite a bit of shaping frequency-wise, volume-wise, and you'll notice panning-wise. There are a lot of work here to get these guitars big and powerful without them being edgy or harsh on the top end, or losing too much low end, or it being panned in a weird place. So it takes a lot of work sometimes to get big, heavy guitars like this, big distorted guitars, especially when they have that kind of wall of sound feeling going with them, to sit right in your mix and still be big, full, and powerful like this. So we're going to walk through plugin by plugin here. We're going to start at the top of the chain on these guitars here. We'll start with this first EQ, work our way down to the pan plugin, and then our final touch will be our EQ on the bus here. Let's start. We'll click on this first EQ here, and then we'll break it down. So we're trimming the frequency range here quite a bit. We're going from a lot of big pumping low end and a lot of harsh, kind of crispy or tingly high end, to really trimming it to just between about 138 and 3.32K. So we're wiping off a lot of the top end, wiping off a lot of the super lows, and focusing in on the mid-range, because that's what you want to sell. That's the heart of the sound on electric guitars, especially on big distorted guitars. You get too much top end going and they can very quickly get really harsh and very out of control, kind of messy sounding. So just our filters here. We got a high pass and we got a low pass. Make sure we don't have too much high end, it's not too harsh. Make sure we don't have too much pumping low end. Then we've got a notch here. That's taking out that kind of pumping noise. We'll play it one more time and I'll boost that up. You can kind of hear what we're getting rid of. Getting rid of the low mid area here, so around 226, so trimming out the low mids there so our guitars aren't too heavy sounding, they're not too muddy sounding in the low mid area, and then adding a little bit of mid-range here to balance out our frequency spectrum. Mid-range, again, is what you're selling on electric guitars. It's what gives them their power and allows them to sit correctly inside of a mix, especially a bigger, more aggressive mix like this. So we'll A-B some of these moves here, take a listen to what they're adding or what they're taking away. So our high pass filter here, trimming out all of that messiness in the low end. We had a little bit of ringing here. That's what this notch is for. This is just trimming some of that mud in the middle. You heard when I pulled that off. Things got kind of muddy down there in the low mid area. The biggest difference for me is definitely the low pass filter. When we take that low pass filter off, the entire frequency spectrum shifts to being really top end heavy. We don't want that. That's a little harsh sounding. So just pulling our filter up till shifts the frequency, shifts the frequency spectrum, shifts our focus more towards the mid-range. So that's our first plug-in there. Moving on to our second one here, we're going to do a little bit of balancing here with a multi-band. So when we have heavy guitars like this, heavy distorted guitars, it's nice to put a multi-band in to balance your top end and your low end. So the multi-band for the top end here, this top range of frequencies is going to control any kind of harshness. It's going to make sure our guitars don't get too edgy or too harsh. So that's holding that down. This is above 1K, set to a limiter ratio, so 20-to-1, fastest attack, fastest release, and then we're pulling it down so it's keeping our top end in check. On the opposite side, this here is 330 and below. So we're taking care of our low mids and the low end on this guitar. So any kind of palm mutes or aggressive picking or hits on a low string don't blow up, especially in a heavy sound like this. That stuff can get really thick when you start layering guitars. We want to make sure our low end is in check and it's controllable. That's what this band is doing here. So again, 20-to-1, fastest attack, fastest release, and we're just pulling them down to control that range here. So we'll do an A-B on this, and you can hear what each band is doing. I'll isolate each band so you can hear it as well. So just pulling it down till we're just kissing it on each of them. So we're just pulling our low mid threshold down, or I'm sorry, our low end threshold down just till it's sitting right above where our volume is, right above where the heart of that sound is hitting into the threshold. So just doing about 3 dB of compression there on the low end of the spectrum, and then same thing on the high end. So 1K and above, just pulling our threshold down just till it's just starting to hit it, just kissing the top of that sound. So about 3 dB of compression on the top. This is just a little bit of control and a little bit of safeguard to make sure our low end and our top end don't get out of control if anything happens. Hits a high note, hits a chord a little bit too hard, we don't get an explosion in the low end, and our top end doesn't run away. Now we've got a little bit of trimming here with this EQ, so we're bringing some of that low end back. Now that we've controlled it, we can boost a range safely without a note blowing up, right? Because it's all evened out, so now we can emphasize what we like about these ranges. So a little bit more ringing here in the middle, and then just a couple notches up top, so another ringing frequency here, and a little bit here in the mid-range. So we're using notch filters here to trim out any more ringing or hissing frequencies up top. And I'll boost some of these up a little bit so you can hear without going too extreme so it doesn't hurt your ears. So on this one, our low pass filter isn't doing too much heavy lifting. It's just there as a safeguard again, just to focus our frequency spectrum a little bit. So this is just a little bit of surgical work on this EQ, and then a nice boost down here to give some heat on the guitars, a little bit of low end, a little bit of weight to them. Moving on here, one more equalizer. This is just adding a little bit in the low mids there, so a little bit here around 360, just to make sure things are a little bit more balanced, and then a little bit more heat under 220. So this is a shelf down here. So adding a little bit more of that and a little bit in the low mid area. So this is tightening up our low mid area a little bit more. We've controlled it. Now we can boost the frequencies that sound nice there to get our guitar some power down there. So this is a little bit more subtle, but that 220 boost right there really gives some power to the low end or the lower notes on our guitar hits there. This one's probably gonna make a huge difference here. So we're taking our binaural pan plugin and we're going all the way up to 200%. So we're spreading them real wide here to make them pretty big sounding. So we'll do an A/B here. Expect quite a huge difference here on this one. All right, so we've gone through, we've controlled the sound. We've got our filters in, we're reducing anything that's too much, putting in our multiband to control our top end and low end, a little bit of safeguarding, trimming out any noise or any hissing, doing a little bit of shaping, and then after we've controlled the sound, then we can throw in our binaural pan and wake it up, wake these guitars up, spread them wide, make them big, make them powerful, make them crunchy, and get them to carry the song because they're going to sit on top of an aggressive bass sound and a drum kit that's really going at it. So we want these guitars to be big and present in the mix. So that's our binaural pan plugin, pushing everything out to the side there. It's pretty aggressive with that, right? All the way up to 200%. Last piece of the puzzle here, one more EQ on our electrics bus. So after I got all my electric guitars in here, there's a little bit of a clean accent guitar, then there's a flange guitar later in the song. I wanted a little bit more mid-range, so we're just boosting a little bit at 1.5K here. Another way you could do this actually, which we can test out here in a second, is with an API 550. I love the 1.5K boost on an API, and it looks like we're doing about 2 dB here, so we'll actually A/B that. I love using a 550 to boost the mid-range on guitar, so we'll take a look at that as well. Here's this last boost here. So just one last finishing boost there to make sure they're not too scoop sounding. When your rhythm guitars are your only big pair of guitars, you don't want them to be so scoop sounding. You want some mid-range in there, especially on an instrumental like this. If there's a vocal, a scoop guitar sound works better because there's a place for the vocal to sit. The guitars have their power on the low end, and they have their crunchiness on the top end, or their distortion in the top end, and then the vocal can sit in the mid-range. If there's no vocal, your guitars sound very empty, your mixes can sound very empty if your guitars are real scoop sounding. So again, selling the mid-range on our electric guitars here. Let's do one last thing here. We'll turn off this EQ here, and we're going to use an API 550. I love the API 550, or this EQ here we'll also try. Just something to give you a little bit of accent in the mid-range. This one is audented, so it means we can only go to certain numbers, so 2, 4, 6, 8, that kind of thing. Here, we're going to boost a little bit. We're going to do 2 dB at 1.5K. Take a listen to what this is going to do. I love using the mid-range boost on this plugin, especially on guitars. So in this case, that's a little bit too much for me. The Pro EQ is a little bit more focused sounding. When we put in the 550, it's more mid-range heavy than I want it to be. This is another great option, this Solar 69 EQ. Let's go to 1.4K, and we'll boost up probably about 2 dB and see what we get sounding. This is a nice EQ for boosting mid-range on guitars as well. So that's a nice mid-range crunch coming from the Solar 69. This plugin's a little bit more tricky to use than the Pro EQ. You can get very precise with the Pro EQ. You notice we only boosted about half a dB here on the Solar 69 EQ, and it's giving us the same effect as boosting 2.5 dB on the Pro Q here. So bear that in mind when you pull in vintage plugins like that. They can be a little bit fidgety or a little bit more tricky to use. But that's our process. That's my process here for getting these heavy distorted guitars to sit better in the mix, to get them to sound mixed, just controlling the sound to start, okay? Using our filters, using our EQ, our multi-band compressor to get our top end and our bottom end to sit correctly before we put in our binaural pan to spread them wide and get them some energy. I hope that was helpful for you. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to go deeper into the mixing process and take your mixes to the next level, then I have just the thing for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.